Hi there, and welcome to Inside the Wooniverse, a podcast brought to you from the corner of Fringe and Maine. I'm your host, Colette Baron-Reid, and joining us today is one of my favorite people on the planet, Gina Gomez. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Gina. She is a highly experienced business strategist and advisor who helps public figures, entertainment industry professionals, and leaders of multi-million-dollar companies build businesses that put people first. Aha. She's worked with people like Marie Forleo, Amy Porterfield, Kate Northrup, and me. And amazing. Anyway, she's been featured as a contributor for Forbes, Red Table Talk, Hay House Radio, and Marie Forleo's Marie TV, among many others. Now, she's also a trusted voice in the field of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and she's the founder of Gina Gomez and Associates, an internationally acclaimed female-led minority company. Now, Gina's method is one that combines the practical with the magical, and we're so happy that she took time out of her busy day to be in conversation with us today on The Wooniverse. Welcome to The Wooniverse, Gina.
Thank you so much. I have been so looking forward to this.
Me too. Me too. Well, you know what? I didn't want to hide you. I wanted people to know how amazing you are. I mean, you changed my life many years ago. You've become my friend, and I think you're extraordinary. And I thought, what a cool thing for us to be talking about today. And let's start when you were this big.
Okay. A minute ago.
Because I know you and I know how deeply spiritual you are. But I want to know, where did you get that magical part of you? So what was your childhood like? When did you become aware of your intuition and of the invisible world?
Oh, this is so funny because I did not know you were going to ask this, and it's not something I talk about, but I'm going to talk about it. So when I was really little, I was probably, if I was 5, that's probably the oldest I was. I'm going to say it was around that age. I had what my parents called an imaginary friend. And I knew it wasn't an imaginary friend. And I remember one day being in the car with my parents. I was sitting in the back seat, strapped in, talking to my imaginary friend. And my parents were driving and they heard me talking. And then they started talking to each other and said, "Who's she talking to? Oh my gosh, she's talking to someone." And then one of them said, "Oh, isn't that cute? She has an imaginary friend." And you know me. I looked over at the empty seat and said, "We're done." And that was the end of it.
Whoa.
Because I did not want to feel foolish. I didn't like that somebody thought, I mean, at a little age when you are cute, I was like, oh no, this is not cute. This is real to me. So now we're done if people are going to make fun of me. So I kept it really quiet and private for the majority of my life. People would ask me things and I would skirt it or I would redirect the question. But it was always kind of like my dirty little secret.
Isn't that what I did not know that about you. Isn't that interesting? We're going to ask all kinds of questions that you're not ready for. But that's really interesting that you had that, because what I got from what you just said was that need to belong, right? In a way, by I'm going to cut this off. I'm going to cut off my magical foot, or this part of me, because somehow either somebody's going to make fun of me, I'm not going to get to belong, and that has to be my secret, right? And that can really mess with your head, when you're trying to figure out where you fit everywhere all the time. If that's the thing that makes you not fit, according to your parents, because they're the ones that feed you, take care of you, they're your primary caregivers that have made a comment. I know I also had a similar thing when my mom was telling my nanny, because she kept saying to her, she has the sight. And my mother goes, "Don't talk about that. Don't tell anybody." And I thought it meant that I didn't need to wear glasses. So I didn't understand why my mom was upset.
That is so funny. Well, here, you might appreciate this. So what was interesting was, and I didn't know this, my mother's mother was the psychic in the neighborhood. So this was way back when. And she used to scry. So she would take a glass of water, fill it to a certain amount, and she would be able to read. And all the neighbors were terrified of her because she would tell the truth. She saw whatever she saw, she said. So my mom was terrified of her because of that. And so that's what I knew. It was like, no, you don't talk about it because the family didn't talk about it. But at the same time, I had aunts and even a mom who was afraid of it, was the one who was always like, "Okay, see what this is? This is a sign. This is what this means. See what this is? That's your intuition." The way I learned how to practice reading was my mom would hand me the Dear Abby column and horoscopes. and
Oh,
say, read the horoscope. So that's how I practice reading. So it's funny that for me, it was like this thing of, don't make fun of me. I'm a serious person, a serious
right.
5-year-old, but it was everywhere in my family, everywhere in my family.
Yeah. And that weird kind of feeling of, is it okay? Is it not okay? But meanwhile, you inherited it from like your grandmother. Because I know you and I know how wildly psychic you actually are, even though you're like super straight business person. But you have this other side to you that's incredible. I've even gotten a reading from you, if you recall.
Yep.
Like, right, I said, can you do me a favor and read the Lenormand for me?
Yep.
And you were so good. So it's a really fascinating thing. I mean, I know it's not what you do in your business, but it's something that you are, and I find it really interesting. So let's actually talk about, because I think all of us have lives, people who are listening to the show, they make big decisions and you're super intuitive. So how does intuition play into making those big decisions? What do you use to make decisions and show people how to make them?
Well, for me, I have to have a balance between the practical, because I'm still very practical, and the
Yeah.
magical. If I
Yeah.
lean too far into one or the other, I never get what I want. It's just, I mean,
Right.
I've learned through experience. For me, that doesn't work. I have to have a balance of the two. So the same
Mm-hmm.
thing happens with decision making. If it's an easy decision, I can feel that in my body, but I also make sure that I have the facts to back it up. If it's
Right.
a difficult decision, same thing, I might just take more time, because then my feelings start to get in the way. And I have to learn
Right.
to separate, like, okay, is this a feeling? Like I want it to happen, or I fear that it will happen or it won't happen? Or is it that there's something going on inside of me that's actually my intuition telling me, hey, you need to check this out a little bit more before you make a decision. So I have to go back and forth until I get to a place where I feel like I've done all of my due diligence. I've flipped over every rock and I've eliminated every risk so that I feel safe in moving forward, however I decide to move forward.
Yeah, interesting that you brought up the body because you and I have talked a number of times when we've been making decisions together about certain things. And I remember your language because, which is why I could kind of see you coming out of the magical closet in front of me when I first met you. I'm like, this woman has the gift because you were like, I feel it, I sense it's, there's just and I was like, yeah, because our body is the instrument of intuition. Our woo-woo-ness comes through our body. It is an instrument like the universe plays us, and we hear that ping note. And you're right, if we start overthinking it or the rest of our feelings start to come into it, it's a very interesting thing, like you said. And I like that you also brought up facts, like magic and the practical. They need to bridge between the two of them because just one without the other, it can actually be a kind of an extreme. You miss out on a lot if you don't put the two together, I think. And this
I
is
completely agree.
yeah.
Completely
Yeah.
agree.
The mystical has to be make friends with the mundane for sure. So, one of the things that I know you do, like I know you run a mastermind and you love teaching about this, and you teach about the emphasis on core values. Let's talk about that from an energetic frequency conversation, the metaphysics of core values. Let's go there.
Okay, you're singing my song. It's like I'm gonna kick my shoes off, lay down on the sofa, and just, okay, let's just talk about it for hours. I love
Great.
talking about this stuff.
Good. Let's do
And
it.
here's why. Because we make decisions in our life. There are personal core values and there are business core values, right? Sometimes they can overlap, but sometimes they're different. So if I say in my personal core values, it's very important for me to be generous with my money. I may not feel that way in business if I want to be profitable. That doesn't mean I can't be generous, but I might look at it a little differently and have to define it differently, right?
Ooh,
Or
interesting.
it could be something like transparency. Transparency is a
Ah,
big one, right? We want transparency from a lot of companies. But what does transparency mean? Does that mean I'm going to show you my internal numbers and tell you
right.
exactly how I price things, what my profit is,
Or
where
your underwear?
right, or is it different? But
Right.
here's why I think core values are so important is because core values are the foundation of the business that help us make decisions,
Right.
especially when we're in tough situations. And that can help us eliminate some of that confusion around our feelings, our intuition. And when we choose words, if we believe that everything is a vibration, those words
Right.
have vibrations.
Right.
So one that's super important to me is integrity. Even when
Yeah.
I say the word, it feels different to me than other words.
Isn't that interesting? So let's actually talk about that, because I believe that everything is energy. But when a person does not know their core values, because let's talk about the person and then let's talk about the business, because there's a lot of people listening in that have businesses or that work. But firstly, the personal, right? So if we don't really know what our values are, I think we can send out a lot of mixed messages, a frequency to the universe that's a little confusing. Mm-hmm. So then we attract scenarios that create more difficulties for ourselves, because then we say, well, what is my value around this, right? So there's no integrity when there's no value. Right? That's what I think. You can't really be integrous unless you know what that actually means.
Yep.
So I think in personal growth, I think that's something that gets overlooked. When I'm doing a personal growth experience, but every once in a while, I think we need to have a core values inventory, because my values have changed as I've gotten older, and the more I've become clearer about those values. Like, I'm like you, I need to be generous with my money. Outside, I like to give, I like all that kind of stuff. That's one of mine too. Mm-hmm. But I also understand that I have to say it's because I want everyone to have access to abundance, and I want to be in the flow. So there's all kinds of different layers to that one value, right? Mm-hmm. Generosity, right?
Right.
And I think from what you've described, when a business has very clear core values, then when a person senses the business, it's like it's sending it out to the universe. It's a frequency. It's a broadcast, mm-hmm. right? People either feel safe, they feel, you know what I'm saying? They feel they can trust it, or they may feel a little niggle and they wonder, why doesn't that feel good?
Mm-hmm. We see this all the time, especially now, because people buy very differently than they did 10, 20 years ago, right? We hold businesses accountable in a very different way than we did before. So understanding what your core values are, one, knowing what your core values are important. I think a lot of times what happens is, and not intentionally, people confuse core values with branding words. So it's like, here's how I want the company to be seen, but I'm not going to do any of this stuff. But for somebody else. And that's when you find out. So if you know what your core values are, then you're also it's going to show up in your copy, on your website, in your emails, and all your marketing materials, the way you interact with people. If you don't know your core values, or you don't adhere to your core values, people are going to see that too. Because if you're writing from a place of integrity, as an example, but your behavior is something totally different, you're not just confusing the market, but you're also doing a detriment to your business and yourself, because you're not in alignment. So that also shows up in leadership and how your business is affected, because behavior plays a part in this too.
Yeah. And again, when we think of the metaphysics of this, if we want to look at the woo version of it, we're sending out that energy. We're sending out that energy. So because I think a lot of online businesses, we need to attract people, right? So it's the kind of attraction rather than promotion. Promotion is very linear. Come here, this is what you get. But attraction is, there's a sense I feel. This is what I feel about these people. This is how I sense who they are. I see what they do, that they also do what they say, right? And those kind of things. And listen, sometimes it takes a while to do what you say and then figure out, is that what I want to do and say?
Right. Also who we align ourselves with. Right. Yeah. And especially in a lot of industries where you see people partner up and do things together, which is always so much fun. But when you don't have the same or an alignment, you don't have to have the exact same core values. But if somebody says my top core value is transparency and someone says mine is the opposite, that can be a problem, right? Or when you're talking about here's another example. If you partner with someone and then suddenly one of those businesses has something happen that's very negative and has a negative impact on the marketplace, or the marketplace responds negatively to what's going on, people get confused so let's just say it's you and me, and I do something and I get called out and people are very upset. People are going to wonder, wait a minute, I see Colette talk about Gina and how they're friends. That doesn't seem like something Colette would do. So am I buying from someone that I shouldn't be buying
from?
Yeah. So that can cause confusion too. So if you ever want to know if you're in alignment with your core values, that's when you really find out, is when you're in a tricky situation, because you should be able to rely on them. If you can't, you got to adjust those core values. And hopefully it doesn't get to that place for you.
Yeah. So I can actually see this just on an energy level. If we look at this, like just for the energetics alone, everything that you've said also makes sense with people, just, with friends. When we change and we grow, because I know you're very much about personal growth, when we make those changes and we move to a different level, we have to start looking at, am I still in energetic alignment with these people? Right. Am I allowing myself to be around people who don't have the same integrity or values, et cetera, or see the world similarly? Like some of my friends, we've never once talked about our jobs. I've been friends with these 3 women that's for like 40 years. None of us care what we do for a living. We hang, you know what I mean? It's like, that's not what brings us together. What brings us together are these like core values that we have deep friendship and we're really honest with each other and we've known each other for so long, blah, blah, blah. And then we can trust the other. So trust is really big. So it's the idea is, if I am going to align myself with this other person, then am I muddying the waters, especially when it comes to manifesting, for example, or co-creating? I prefer to use that term. We want to co-create our reality. Well, then who are we around?
Right.
Like what? Because they also send the same signal, because we're saying we're with them. And they're sending out a signal that might be crisscross to yours. So it's really interesting how important this is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's why I am so passionate about the conversation, but also looking how we're affected. So when I'm teaching the mastermind, one of the things I do is have them identify people who represent the core values, because sometimes people have a very hard time. If you say, okay, come up with 4 to 6 core values, they don't know where to start because there's so many words you can choose from, right? So many values. But if I say, tell me 3 people that you really, really admire, you could probably give me 10.
Right.
And then I go, okay, so let's take the first 3. Tell me one thing that you really admire about that person. And then that's when we start to get to the integrity. If we go through all 10, we're going to start to see a pattern, because some of those words are going to repeat. Now we can get clear on your core values.
Oh, that's really cool. So, can you give me an example of just maybe 1 or 2 people that were common for some of the people without giving your secrets away?
Okay, so I'll use one from me, and then I'll give you an example of another way. So when I was a kid, my father worked in the court system. And one of the judges that he was very good friends with, who became a friend of the family, was somebody that my parents really liked and respected. And he was an adult. And so here I was a little kid, but when I would walk into the room, he would act like he'd been waiting all day for me to walk into that room. He would pay so much attention to me. And I thought, no adults pay attention to me, because I was a kid. So I was like, this is fascinating. And I remember my parents talking one day about how much they admired and respected him. And I remember one of them saying, he has so much integrity. Now, in my family, you were not allowed to ask what a word meant or how to spell it unless you looked it up in the dictionary, because if you did ask, you had to pay a quarter. So I go running to the dictionary to look up what this word integrity is and what it means. And when I read it, I was like, oh, this is it. This is what I want. I want to be someone like this judge. And so that became very influential and instrumental in my life, in my career, in the way that I do things. Now, that doesn't mean that I get it right every time. But if I'm leading with integrity and I mess up, I have an opportunity to go back and correct it and going forward. So that's a real life example.
Yeah.
Sometimes people will have a hard time coming up with a real example because of experience, because of their limited outreach, whatever it is. So in that case, I'll say, give me a character from a movie or a TV show. Ted Lasso. He's a great example, right? Great example of somebody who... And
I love Ted Lasso.
So do I. And have all these.
But I love Roy Kent more.
I do too.
Anyway, go on.
Looking at those core values, right? There are going to be some that overlap, but probably there are going to be a couple that are different, even between those 2 characters.
Right.
So when you start to get more specific about it, because like I said, people can, and again, vibration, right? If you're drawn to a character or a person, what is it that draws you in?
I love that. Because, one of the things that we do in Oracle School is we come up with allies. I do this with my mastermind too. But the idea that the ally is a character that actually represents the integrity of an energy, right? And so when we make that connection to that energy. It's living, it's alive, right? And then when either it's because we might lack it or aspire to have it, or that we one day would hope that we would become this, right? So this, right? And so you can use that aspirationally, and it gives you an opportunity to look forward, but also to learn from this. Oh, this character, I wish I would more like that. I love the way they handled this or whatever. And yeah, television characters, movie characters in books, historical characters that we don't really know, made shitloads of mistakes, right? But they look good, right?
Right. Or you might look at someone like, I always think of Angela Bassett in Waiting to Exhale, where she throws the match behind her. I'm like, gosh, I love that she's just like, I'm not taking any of this. Now, I would not do that, but I love that embodiment of, I stand up for myself. I don't take any BS.
I love that. Yeah. This is actually really good for listeners to actually practice this. I mean, it's a really practical way. And it is, by the way, a magical technique when you do that, because you are actually using the energy of this iconic figure, if you will, because it's iconic, or it's like sigil magic, really, is where you have the icon, there's the energy you aspire to, and you say, this represents this to me. So when you think of those characters, oh yeah, that's what I'm trying to, am I in alignment with this energy? It's a really great system that you've come up with. I love it. Okay. So let me ask you a question these days. So what really inspires you and motivates you lately in your work? I know you work with people from all industries. I know you're in the entertainment business. You work with a few of us in our woo-woo world or personal transformation world, but you really got, businessy. But just on an energetic level, what inspires you right now?
My first thought was ice cream, but I know that's the wrong. I think the thing that inspires me the most right now, and it's consistent, so it's not even just right now, is I really love working with people who understand the value of people and understand that they cannot have a business or a following without caring about people. When somebody says that, like a lot of times I'll hear people say like, I care, but the action shows something else. It's such a turn off for me, because I'm like, I get where you are, but this just isn't a fit. And for me, it's as I've gotten older and more experienced, I also won't stay in situations like that, because it's not even just me. It doesn't do the client any good, because we have two different goals.
Yeah.
And I don't want to take money from somebody who's going in a different direction, because then it's just a lot of this, and that's not fun for anybody.
Yeah, I think too, the more we love people, like I love people. I just love people. And like I love my people. I just love doing what I do. That's probably why you stayed working with me, because I do love the people.
Yeah, you do.
But I just think the energy of caring and being compassionate for people is something we need more of anyway, right? And it is, if our energy is, the output is that I'm in alignment with loving the people who come. I genuinely am. I feel like I've got a second chance at life, so I'm going to spend that chance at life on caring for the people in front of me. But that makes me get up in the morning, and I know that I can watch transformation happen. And I know you've watched transformation happen. Talk to me a little bit about that experience that you have working with people that love the people, but then seeing them transform, because you were a big instrument in my transformation. So tell me a bit about how that feels for you.
Well, for me, it's so much fun, because a lot of times what happens is people know that what they want to do. It's like, I want to affect change in a positive way. I want to do something to show my team that they're valuable. I want to do something that really heightens the customer experience, right? Things like that. So when people come to me and they say something like, they'll also say, I don't even know where to start. So then we start to, and you and I have even done this. It's like, okay, well, let's break it down before we come up with a plan. When you say you want this, can you give me some examples of what this looks like? That way I'm not making assumptions about what it means for you, as an example, to say, I want to serve people better. So what does better look like to you, so that I'm not projecting my stuff? And then once we start to do that, we can create a plan. We also, and you know this because I'm someone who always looks at, because this is the way I was trained, I always look at all the potential risks and how to eliminate or minimize the risks, so that clients feel safe moving forward and implementing whatever we're going to do. So we always look at not just what's the best that can happen, but what's
the worst.
And how do we prevent the worst from happening?
Right.
Once that starts to happen, the client feels safer. And when they start to implement, this is my favorite part, is when they start to implement and then they come back and they go, okay, I did it. And you're not going to believe what happened. And I always go, I'm going to believe what happened because I've heard these things, but it never gets old for me because it's so much fun when someone like you says, oh my gosh, we did this thing and look at the impact that it had. Look at
Yeah.
we doubled our enrollment. That also
Yeah.
brings more revenue, which means we can hire more people and we
Yeah.
want to diversify the team more. And it's just watching that whole ripple effect is so much fun for me because it also builds confidence in leadership in the
Mm-hmm.
actual leaders where they go, okay, what are we going to do next? And that
Right.
is so fun.
So, your work is metaphysical, right? You do know that, right? Okay. It sounds very straight and normal. It's totally not. Because I will go back and I will say, so if we look at the transformative piece, because you come in, and by the way, I do want to mention how much I enjoyed when you said, so I need to know from you what that looks like to you so I don't project my idea onto you. Because so here's why what you do is empowering and why we can just look at this in general in relationships or in any part of our life when we have a tendency to project what we think should be. This could be with your marriage. This could be with your kids, with anything. It's the fact that, no, there's a respect where you say, okay, I'm here to hold space for your transformation, but you're the one that's going to do the work. So a lot of people come, tell me what to do. You do it for me, right? And that is like, so doesn't work. Like you transform me. But instead, what you do is you give a platform for transformation by helping the client discover, and really it's like, how do we discover who we are basically? And how do we move to this next level that we know we want, but we don't know how to get there.
Right.
But you don't tell us how to get there. You're like, I'm going to hold the space for you to figure that out. I'm going to give you some hints. I'm going to give you a plan, but ultimately you have to actually live the plan. And I think that's why the transformation process that you usher people through with your company, and it's very similar to what I teach in Oracle School, believe it or not, but it's that sense of, I'm going to show somebody to empower themselves to do the work. And then they're going to come back and freak out on me because they're going, oh my God, this really worked. And you'll go, yeah, because you're kind of like a midwife. I know what you are. You're a business metaphysical transformation midwife. That's what you are. A metaphysical midwife for business. I got it.
Well, and here's why I do it. So one thing is, if somebody's stuck, so here's what does happen, because I work with a lot of established leaders. So in traditional coaching, as we know, the coach will say, well, what do you think? Because we're taught the client has the answers all inside of them. And I don't disagree with that. But in the work that I do, they've done, and you're one of those people, you've done all those things. So now you're coming and you're like, I have tried everything. I'm stuck. Can you just help me? Can we not do this whole well, what do you think? And dance again.
Right.
So I'll give recommendations. But the reason why I don't say, here's what you need to do, and you have to do it this way or no way, is because it changes the level of accountability.
Yes.
You own the business. You run your company. So if you don't buy into what I'm saying, you're not going to buy into what I'm telling you to do. And then if you don't get the result, or you don't put all of your effort and energy into it, you're definitely not going to get the result. But if you don't get the result or the outcome, or you don't believe in it, you're not going to get the long-term results either.
Right. And you know what? What you just said is just straightforward metaphysical manifesting, right? Which is you need to be accountable for the energy.
Yeah.
You need to hear it, and then you need to do it. You need to try it. It's one step towards the gods. They have to take 10 towards you. You don't keep running past them and say, I'm too busy now. Or you don't say, Gina, will you take the step for me? Right? You recommend, I recommend you get out of the couch, get up and do something. Right. It's like you don't say, well, you're going to need to do this, 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 and this, which is still, telling them, okay, here's an opportunity I have to do something different that I didn't see quite before, but they still have to do it. And that's where the accountability piece. And that is how people get genuinely successful, not just like you say in the actual business world that, that's the world you live in, but just in, again, general manifesting, general co-creation. We have to be accountable for our energy, the behaviors that go along with that, the changes we need to make when we F up, right? Yep. And to keep going that way so that we know we're the ones that have done it.
Yeah.
right? And that's where the magic is.
And I never want someone to feel like they're on the hook, meaning that they
Right.
have to keep me as part of their business forever. That is not my job.
Yeah.
My job is to teach you to fish so that you can
Yeah.
do anything once you have these skills. And I'm always accessible, and I'll have clients come in and then they go do their thing and then they come back. And that's always fun for me because I like to stay in touch with people just to keep a pulse, and because I love the people that I get to work with. So it's very natural for me to do that. But also the ebb and flow is very fun to see, like if someone's taken a break for a couple of years, what they've done, where the next level is, how I can come in and help. And that's really fun for me. And I think it works well because it can also be more effective for a business rather than keeping somebody on because you feel like you have to.
Okay, so I've got so many interesting questions for you. So how do you continue to evolve and stay aligned with your own magic and purpose, you personally? I'd love to hear, because I've seen you really change a lot over the past few years too. I've known you for quite a while now. So I want to know your steps. Like, do you meditate? Do you have any magical practices? I know you read Lenormand really well.
I do.
I was going to get you to teach me how.
I will teach you anytime. I do meditate. I meditate twice a day. I also, every night as I'm drifting off to sleep, I always make a list of, count through the day of all the things I'm grateful for that took place that day. It just helps me remind myself, especially on those not so great days when it doesn't feel like I have a lot to be grateful for, that it just kind of shifts things for me, where it's like, yeah, today was a hard day, but let's look at all the other things. It's not all bad, because sometimes it can feel that way, especially when you feel like you're being knocked down, knocked down, knocked down.
Yeah.
The other thing is I work with a coach. I've done therapy.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay.
And what I find is, for me, a lot of personal things come up and I think this is true for most leaders if we're really honest about it, that yes, we have all the business things, but personal things come up too. And so when I notice something is coming up for me, I'm like, okay.
I have a therapist.
Yeah. Like, okay, what do I need to do? How do I need just to take a break so I can, rest up? Because sometimes I tend to, and you know this about me, I tend to push. I'm always working, always trying to, make sure that my clients are taken care of and that I'm focusing on the long term. But I find that sometimes I get too wrapped up in that. And then suddenly I'm pushing the boulder uphill and I'm like, I don't know why I'm tired. I'm exhausted. And so I need to take a step back. I also find that, things like a pandemic will force you into looking at your life a little differently. So for me, so for me, it was, well, we're home. So make a list of all the things you say you never have time to do and start doing them. And that's when I really started doing some really deep personal work. And it was hard. It was really hard.
Yeah.
Affected a lot of my relationships, a lot of how I see the world, a lot of how I show up. And it's part of the transformation.
Yeah.
And
It is hard.
Wonderful things about it. Yeah. It's not a fairy tale.
I love that, because a lot of people come into the metaphysical spaces, which is my actual business, and really are looking for a magic bullet. They just want to come in, and I don't think they really intellectually say, oh, I want to bypass everything. But I think that there's this undercurrent of they kind of want to bypass the hard stuff, like, oh, where's the magic? Because I do believe that the mystical, the magical, the invisible, the quantum, that's all primary. But the work is painful. It can be very painful. In order to change, you have to let some things die, but you have to face them. It's like the best way is to go through, right? And so, and I know the pandemic was that for me as well too, and I know I also feel that, when we work in our business where we impact other people, which you do and I do, that we owe it to them for us to have our shit together. All right. So it's like me, I have a coach and a therapist.
Yep.
I have both.
Yeah. I think, to your point, and this is why I was smiling, is I think it's so much easier to say, I don't want to tolerate bad behavior from everyone around me. That's so much easier than to say, oh, wait, I'm part of the problem.
Right.
Talk about what's going on. Wait, what do you mean I do da 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 da? Like that.
Right.
That was really hard for me. And what I realized was, And it wasn't that I didn't think I wasn't part of the problem. Clearly,
Yeah.
I'm the common denominator. What I didn't understand was how many wounds I had that I had not healed, because I thought I had
Mhm.
on the surface.
Yep.
I had not healed, and how it was affecting every other thing in my life. I thought, oh, I've got this part of my life together, but this part could use a little work. When I really started doing the deep therapy and coaching and all of those things that went
Mhm.
with it, that's when I realized, oh, this isn't one thing, this is everything. And
Yep.
that was hard for me to start to understand, but it was also one of the best gifts I could have gotten
Yep.
because I was no longer compartmentalizing. And
Compartmentalizing.
then I
Yeah.
really had to get honest and go, okay, am I really committed to doing the work and going through it? And I did, and still do.
And that alone. So look at it in terms of energy. You're cleaning. So all of a sudden then you start to attract different people as a result of that because you're not carrying that. And those are the mixed messages. When we're in denial about the work that we have to do, we tend to find ourselves in situations that remind us of those things until we actually, Carl Jung said, whatever we refuse to bring up from the unconscious into our consciousness and awareness and heal that seemingly comes to us as fate.
Mhm.
And when the same thing keeps coming up, like I've noticed, I'm not attracted to, nor am I seeing in my life any more of the unsafe scenarios that I had because I decided to finally look at the scariest part that I needed to heal from so many way back when that had nothing to do with any of the people that kept showing up. It was the fact that I kept attracting the pattern. So for me to finally say, oh, I'm going to have to look at this. And,
Yeah.
And it is painful, but it's so liberating.
It really is. And I think accountability, as much as I hate to admit it,
Yeah.
accountability is liberating.
It is. It totally is. Okay, so what ways can embracing a sense of wonder, that magical sense of wonder and trust in spirit, what ways can that support people in breaking through their limiting beliefs and to expand their possibilities?
This is such a good question. I think for me, the most important thing is always having a curious mind. So even when things are not moving in the direction that I want,
Yep.
I can get to a place where it could be very easy for me to be like, well, this just isn't for me, right? Or I could say, well, maybe it's not for me right now. Maybe there's some,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe it's not ever, but maybe there's something else instead of just like, well, this is just not it, right? So I always try to find like, if this isn't it, or I get a no, I don't look at it and I go, I got to know. There goes my day. There was a time when I would do things like that when I was a
Right?
lot younger and I hadn't learned things
Me
the way I
too.
know. Now what I'll do is I'll be like, oh, I'm one step closer to a yes. So I don't know what the yes is going to be, but here's what I do know is that when I trust in that, the yes is usually better than what
Right.
was no. And when I
Right.
don't trust in that, I usually mess it up because my grasp gets too tight. And I know that because I can feel
Yeah.
that too. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm trying to force it because it's something I really want. So in that case, if I can get to that place, because sometimes when you're in it, you're just in it. But if I can get to that place, then I can stop and go, oh, this is really important to me. Well, good. It should be important to me.
I love that. So let's go backwards a little bit on that because that's really about surrendering the form in manifestation. So if we go to just talk about manifestation practices, because I know you believe in it, tell me a little bit about the role of intention setting and visualization in manifesting that desired outcome, which you just said really the way to do it is to let it go, which is hugely important. But tell me your
I'm
way
not
of.
always that good at it. So
Well,
let me just be
I
clear
know, but you did hit the nail on the head. We are talking about what actually works. So how do you set intentions? What does that look like to you?
So I'll give you an example of something I do every year. So every year on January 1st, I've done this for decades now. I will make a list of at least 10 things I want to manifest.
Right.
Sometimes what I'll do is I'll also say, and I do this on an annual basis, just not always on January 1st, where I'll list 10 clients that I want to work with in the year. Sometimes I'll
Oh,
get specific and I'll use the name. Sometimes it'll be people I've worked with in the past that I'd like to work with again.
yeah.
Sometimes it's more the characteristics. Like I would love to work
Oh,
with somebody in theater who is located in this area and is trying to
which
do
you are,
this. Yeah. Yes. Well,
which you
and
manifested them.
this is part of how it happened. And it was like, because I want to affect change in a positive way on this level. So in order for me to do that, who do I need to get in front of? So I'll work
I love
backwards.
that.
And then other times I won't have a name, I won't have an industry, I won't have the type of work. I might say something like, I want a client who values and appreciates the work so much and gets such great results that they just send me referrals all the time.
Right.
Right. Or that we laugh, and I think this is a good example of you and I, that we laugh so much that it never feels like work, even when it's
Right.
hard work.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
So what I find is that when I don't attach too much to the form, if I have a name in mind, that's a little different. But even still, it might be a thing of like, well, let's just see if it happens. And I will
Right.
always do at least one that's a stretch because I just want
Right.
to see what happens.
Right, right. Remember, we were both on Red Table Talk
Yeah.
because we both jointly put it out to the universe. I want to be more impactful to a broader audience, in a completely out like stratospheric way. And then all of a sudden, we get the call, would you like to be the guest coaches on, both you and I were guest
Yeah.
coaches on the Red Table Talk thing with another coach. And we were like, okay, well, this works, this manifesting stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it was so meaningful. I love it. I love it. And I love what you said too about, so when you want to manifest something and what you intend, so in your case, because I do know that you did get the theater client because you were very specific. So you can be specific, but then you have to surrender that because this is something better. Maybe this is it, maybe it isn't, but it feels, do you find that your intention setting has to feel like a plunk in your body, that it doesn't feel like a grasping, like that's what I find. I find if I'm going to make an intention for something, it has to just feel right in my body first, or I'm chasing something. Does that make sense? Does that feel the same way to you?
It depends. Sometimes it's more of a, well, let's just see what happens. And I don't necessarily think it's going to happen, but I do it because I just want to see. Like it's more like
Right.
it's an experiment, right?
Yeah.
So my body's not going to have the same response
Right.
to something that feels more reasonable or attainable, right? Like, oh,
Right.
I'd really love to work with the person I met at that networking event last month.
Which
That's
is
a
a lot
little
more,
different
yeah.
because there's actually an established rapport or relationship. So I do pay attention to how I feel in my body. If I notice something feels off, because my body, our bodies are telling us all the time what's going
Yeah.
on. So if something feels off, it may not be that that's not the right thing. It might be the way that I have it intended is not the right thing. So it might
Ooh.
be, oh no, it doesn't have to be this specific person. It could be anyone in this kind of role in this type of industry. Right.
Interesting.
So I might have closed myself off to somebody who's a better fit because I think it has to be the person I'm imagining in my head.
I love that. You said that so articulately, that it's the way you've intended it. So that it's not that it's not correct. It's that you had an attachment to the form. That
Correct.
this is, I see it, this is the only person, this is the only thing. But wait a sec, what if spirit sends me somebody like that, but in a better fit for me? You're right. You'd be shutting yourself off if you're just chasing that. So I get that. And I do also find I'm way less this way, but I used to chase. I used to decide the intention. That's the way I'm going to have it. Then I'm going to go get it the way I want it, how I want it, when I want it, the where, why, you know what I'm saying? And then when it didn't happen, I was bad, wrong. It didn't work. Oh boy, so sad. And then bang, and then
Universe hates me.
right, the world hates me. But then boomerangs, then every time I've done that and I forgot about it, it boomerangs back and basically hits me in the head because it actually happens
Right.
when I don't care about it anymore. And I'm like, why is this happening to me now? Because I don't care. It's like with my record deal. I completely manifested that. And then by then I'm like, I go to bed at 9:00. I am not going to sing in a bar at 11. Like it was just all this stuff. I realized, what am I doing? I wanted all this so bad my whole life. And now that it's there, I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. And it's funny, I think, and I'm curious to know if this is the same for you, when sometimes we think we know what we want and we set the
Right.
intention and then it shows up and it's like, oh shoot, this isn't what I wanted at all.
Right. Because I think, you know what it is? Because we don't realize that what we wanted, that the truth of what we wanted when we're manifesting something in business or in personal life, whatever, is actually the feeling we're hoping getting it is going to give us.
Yep.
That there's a hidden agenda attached to that that's supposed to either help us, heal us, do something. And sometimes we want something it's not actually made to do.
Right. And
Right.
I think that's why it's always important that when we're setting an intention to also identify why we want this thing. I do the same thing with gratitude. So I'll just use my sweet doggy as an example. Every night when I'm going through my gratitude list, he's towards the top of the list or at the top of the list.
Right.
And I don't just say I'm so grateful that I have this sweet puppy. I'm grateful for this puppy because there's a lot of love in the house. I'm
Yes.
grateful for this puppy because he forces me to stop working at a reasonable hour. I'm
Right.
grateful for this puppy because he just makes me laugh all day long.
Right.
Those are valuable, meaningful things to me. So I can say I'm grateful for him, but when I'm clear about why I'm grateful for him, it also, like, I can feel the energy shift in my body. I can feel like I feel my heart flutter a little bit, my heart chakra flutter.
Yeah.
I feel more connected to him because I'm
Yeah.
very clear about what he brings into my life.
It's so interesting. One of my 3 dogs sleeps in my arms at night, and she started doing it about a year ago. And I sleep on my side and I hug a pillow. And she, once I've settled in, she climbs over me and settles in sort of half on the pillow and her legs stuck by my belly. Right? And I have to be honest, I like to be cool, but I put up with it because there's so much love, like you said. So every night, besides it, I mean, Mark and I never go to bed angry. I mean, we don't get really angry ever, really, but you know what I mean? We love each other. There's love there anyway. But I got to tell you, it's so true what you just said. And there is an energy that's so healing for whatever happened during my day when I'm holding this little dog, you know, who snores and makes noises and whatever, and she's too hot. But I sit there and going, I am so filled with gratitude for this love and this trust and this sense of connection that I feel. And I feel that God is the dog, right? You know what I mean? It's just, and it really does help me continue to manifest in my head too. Like, how can I co-create a reality that's better, not just for myself, but all the people that come into my world?
Right.
You know, and just very simple. One of the things I do want to mention is you have lots of daily routines. Like you said, you meditate twice a day, et cetera, and that's really good. So do you have any other practical tools that you want to share that you use that helps you with your stay in your magic, either personally or bring in the magic into business? Even though you probably don't do the magic in front of a lot of people, but I happen to know you do some back behind the scenes.
It depends. It depends.
With us, you can.
Yeah, and I do. For me, and this has been something I've done for a long, long time, and I got out of the habit and then I got back into it because I just kind of, you know, when life happens and then you go, what happened? And then you go back to some of the things that used to work. So Sundays, it is very rare that I will make plans to do something with anybody. Sundays are my day to be at home. That is when I do my reading. That is when I'm doing my spiritual practices. It's when I'm journaling, writing what I want to intend. And I'm also reassessing and looking at what's working. Where am I on track? Where am I off track? And where do I need to adjust? And what I find is that if I give myself that day, that Sunday, sometimes I'll swap it out, but it's usually, I'm pretty strict where it's Sunday. That I also get a lot of rest. So I create a lot of space in the house. And I love to burn incense in the house all the time. So that's something I do every morning. As soon as I walk downstairs, the incense is lit. So I try to engage all the senses as much as I can. And I just allow for space. It's harder for me during the week because I'm so focused on work to hear my own thoughts because I'm giving and I'm processing, I'm doing things. I can do it when I get a break, but for me to really separate myself from it, I have to have that separate block of time. It's also a gift for me because from me to me, because it's also where I replenish my energy. If I don't get that time, I feel the difference on Monday morning when I start to work. And I feel a little robbed, quite honestly.
Right.
But it's on me. It's like, oh, well, you chose not to do this, so you don't get to be robbed. You robbed yourself. And then I will adjust.
See, I think that's really interesting because it is so true to having that personal inventory day, but also a resting day, because I know a lot of entrepreneurs, they, sometimes we work 7 days in marketing. Let's go for a walk. Let's get out of the house. Let's not be doing this. And we go to this very special, like where all the farms bring their food in a different town, and we go there. That's like our ritual for us on Saturdays. We don't mess with our Saturday morning. No. That's what we do. And it's really nice because it's like, oh, we can just hang out and we're not talking about business. And I do think it's really important because I think that the hustle culture of, has caused a lot of harm to a lot of people, whether they're in entrepreneurs or not. I think that whole go, produce can be really exhausting. So really committing to that rest, I think it's just on an energetic level, plus that frequency, yet again, that, you're sending that metaphysical energy to everybody that I have taken care of me.
Right.
And that is one thing that I will say too, that I know about you, is you have a lot of self-respect. And that really, really comes across just energy-wise. I remember when I first met you, I went, ooh, this woman really is something.
Thank you.
Grounded, you knew who you were. And I was really struck by you. I think we were introduced by Dougal Fraser, who's been on the show. And it was just really cool. And I was like, I'm going to know her a long time, because that's like 10 years ago. It's amazing. You are a trusted voice in DEI also, because that is, what you have done for us, although you do lots of other things for us as well too. But that is one thing that you do in your international business. So for any of our listeners who might be entrepreneurs or business owners, what are some practical strategies or steps besides hiring you and your team, your amazing team, who are amazing? Could they foster a more inclusive and welcoming environment for their teams and customers? Even just a little bit of a hint, right? So.
Yeah.
Because it's important these days. I think we should all be on this path.
Yeah, it to me, it's always been important and always been a critical part of business, but we've always separated it and treated it like a separate part of business, and it really isn't. The way I do everything in my business, as you know, is with an inclusive lens. So whether we're looking at hiring or growing the profitability in your business, we do it from a DEI lens. And I think if you're somebody who's starting, or someone who doesn't know where to start, or you're trying to figure out what the next step is, the most important thing you can do is start to educate yourself. And that means also looking at how we all participate in not being inclusive, in microaggressions, in racist behaviors. And it's not just, as we know, DEI is not just related to race. It's a critical part of the conversation. We also have to consider age, disability, marital status, gender, all of those things, right? So the more we learn, because usually what happens is, if I'm having a conversation with someone comes to me and says, so-and-so told me to call you because they said you would know how to help me. And then they start to tell me what happened. And they'll say, somebody called me out because I did this, and they said it was racist. And I go, well, I hate to break it to you, but that is racist. And then they say, I'm not a racist. I didn't say you were a racist. Those people didn't say you were a racist. So it's important to be open to looking at how we've all participated, but also to understand a lot of it is from the outside world too, that impacts our inability to see where we're at fault or have accountability. The second thing is to listen. Really listen to people. It's so hard when you say, I know it all. And people, because I read 25 books, and people are like, but I live this. Can you just look at me for a minute and hear what I'm saying? And then the third thing would be to start looking at, what are some possible solutions? So whether you bring somebody in or you decide to do it yourself, but I always recommend bringing in some kind of trusted advisor so that you don't move in the wrong direction, because you're trying to guess your way through it, because that can cause a lot more harm. And I've seen it over and over again. But really starting to take action towards an inclusive environment, company culture, all of those things, as you know, like, they also improve the bottom line. That's not the reason to do it. But if that's what it takes to get people to do it, then I always say, well, does it help to tell you that there are stats that show that when you are inclusive and you create a safe culture, that it creates positive impacts all around.
And people are happier. You
Oh,
know,
for
I think
sure.
it's there's just a greater sense of happiness, and I mean, listen, I am a forever student of this. I am always learning. I'm always looking, and I assume I'm never going to graduate from this, right? So, but it's just important to also go in with the open-mindedness without any shame or any guilt, and just say, okay, what do I need to look at? You know, how do I do this better? Because if you don't know, you can't change. If you
Right,
don't, or if you're not willing to look, you can't change either, and you won't be building that. This,
right.
and it's all about energy too, right? Again,
Right.
because people feel that. They feel like, am I in an inclusive environment, or am I in a place where it doesn't feel so good?
And here's what I
Um,
can tell you, and you know this from being a woman who's probably been discriminated against at some point in your lifetime.
yeah,
We know when someone is insincere and discriminated, and they're like, "Oh, I've never discriminated." And we're like, "I just saw what you did right there, and you don't even know what you just did."
yeah,
And so I think it's important, and I love what you said about how you're, and I'm paraphrasing, that you know you're going to be a forever student in
yeah,
learning this. I think that is a critical, critical piece. Even me, who does this for a living, I am constantly learning. And the thing I know more than everything else is that I will never know it all because there is so much to learn and so much to
yeah.
understand. It is my job to know as much of it as possible and to stay as current as possible.
Yeah. And I think that's a good thing too about being current in the world. Like the world is changing rapidly. And I think we'll segue into a more general view of this. We are in a humongous transition right now.
Mhm.
So many things are changing. So what may be true today, or what might be the focus today in 6 months is radically different, because this might happen or that might happen, or we have a different lens or something else has been peeled away,
Mhm.
but the core is that, and I remember my first CD, which was Journey Through the Chakras, was sold through the House of Blues, which was the Hard Rock Cafe. And he was a big Sai Baba devotee. And there was a big sign in all the Hard Rock Cafes, by the way, that says unity and diversity. And that was a Sai Baba ism,
Oh,
right? And
interesting.
right, unity and diversity. And that is so true, is that we are. So hopefully, maybe in our lifetime, I hope we will in our lifetime see something that would be a little bit more in alignment with that concept. But that's what I know. It's a very simple thing to remember, but that's the thing that always leads me forward: unity and diversity, right? And and it's not just diversity, it has to be inclusive.
Right.
Right, you have to include everyone. You just don't point out and go, okay, you sat in the right boxes, right? It has to work that way. I love it. Okay, so let's pull a card together.
Okay.
Okay, let's pull a card together to see what the Wooniverse wants us to talk about. Did we miss anything? Did we want to talk about anything? Okay, so we are going to pull a Dreamweaver's Oracle. Okay, so this is really cool. So this is really important too. So the card we got was Weavers Watch the Dragons Fly. So I'm going to read it and we can just riff on it for a second.
Okay.
So it's about being the observer, be curious, curiosity, seeing the big picture, not taking this world personally.
Ah,
Let's talk about that, because that brings a whole bunch of energy to this conversation before we head over to the tea time after party.
I'll tell you what it reminds me of. I was talking to someone just last week and we were talking about how you can have it all together where you're like, I'm trusting in the universe. The universe has my back. I take 2 steps forward. The universe is going to meet me, blah, 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 blah. And then you do something like me, spill coffee grounds on the floor. And I'm like, I get it. You hate me. It's going to be a terrible day. And then I stop and I realize, okay, calm down. But I think that's the thing about how we can make things personal, right? Like I'm so
Personal,
like,
yep.
I trust, and trust as long as you're doing what I want. But I
Right.
don't have time to clean up these coffee grounds. I am manifesting.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah. Yeah. And also, I think the observer, it's not coming from a place of lack of compassion. This is really talking also about, not being personal, not projecting, not taking stuff on because somebody misbehaves in your world or whatever. And you realize that really is about them. So, really recognizing that there is a more of a neutral space that we could hold to observe things from a bigger picture point of view, as opposed to being it all about, it hurt me, he
Right.
did that to me,
Right.
or the universe did that to you and didn't give you what you wanted, right? All of that, right? It's not personal. It's like if we wear the world loosely around our shoulders and stay curious, more adventure happens.
I 100% agree. And I think this is also where accountability comes into play again, right? Where
Yep.
if we're taking something personally, why are we taking it personal?
Yeah.
What,
Right.
like, is there a wound? Because this is how I look at it. When someone is having a response and they're emotional, whether it's crying or whatever, or it's me, I'll take a minute and take a step back and go, okay, what's really going on here? Because
Right.
there's something, if I'm having a reaction or an emotional response, there's something else, and it might be the surface, but most of the time it's something deeper, like a past wound. And the way that I see it is, oh, that's so wonderful. That means there's an opportunity for me to heal. It's coming up because I'm ready to heal it. But if I don't want to heal it, I'll have plenty of other opportunities down the road because it's going to keep coming up and coming up and coming up.
Because it will.
Right.
And I don't always get that quickly to that place that you're talking about, but I do too, because we do have to get there.
Yeah.
But I do know the same thing. It's like it's going to keep coming when you think you're a victim of another person's behavior, or they did it right. It's not really. It's like, oh wait, why am I tolerating this? What does this remind me of? Oh my God, it's this thing that I've refused to look at all this time. And this isn't about them. This is about my response to them. Because if that person did that to the person beside me and they didn't have the same wound, they wouldn't have cared.
Right.
Right? It's just like we're having this experience. I love it. Okay, we are going to do something new and fun. We are going to switch gears and travel to another dimension of the Wooniverse called the Tea Time After Party.
Excellent.
And here is Connie Diletti, our executive producer, who is joining us.
Hi.
Was that not the best ever?
Oh, I was taking notes. I was like, this is so great. Yeah, it was amazing.
This is good. Love it. So we're going to ask you some fun questions.
Okay.
All right. So
I
I'm going to
have
start.
my tea, my iced tea.
Yeah, your iced tea. Okay,
Good.
great. Okay. If you could be wildly successful in a whole other profession, what would it be?
I would love to be a backup singer. I don't care about being the lead singer because I like, this is what I always joke about, and you've heard me say this. Money's very important to me. Fame, I can care less about fame, but I like famous people kind of money. So that's my dream.
Okay, so if you could magically be fluent in any language overnight, what language would you choose?
Spanish.
Oh,
Because I am Mexican and was raised by Mexicans, but it sounds like I was raised by wolves by the way I say it. So I was also raised at a time when you didn't teach your kids because you wanted them to acclimate here in the US and be American. So the Spanish I learned was in school, and it takes me a minute to get back into it. But because it takes me a minute to get back into it, I would love to be able to be fluent and not have to.
Yeah. Okay.
I love Spanish.
Yeah.
If you could invent a new holiday, what would it be called and how would it be celebrated?
What would it be called? I know what it is. Maybe it's called Be Good to Me Day. I think everyone should have a personal day. Like, you know how we always talk about, oh, I need a mental health day. I think everybody should have a personal day where, or maybe it's like a yes day, like how parents do that with kids. And you just go and you do what you want to do. One of the things I do that's a kind of a form of this is I call it unstructured day or unstructured weekend. And the only rule is that I cannot make any rules.
Oh, that's great.
And I'll tell you what, it's really fun is when you have like people staying from out of town and you go, I've made no plans today. The only plan is we're going to do whatever we want in the moment. And it's so much fun when it's like, well, let's get on the train and go to San Diego. Okay.
Right.
Oh, that sounds like fun. I think I would have an ice cream has no calories day.
I'm on my way. Is it this afternoon? I'm on my way.
You said it.
That's no rules, right?
No rules. That's
day.
right. Ice cream has no calories day or dairy, even though it's in it. Ice cream is good for you day.
I think that should be every day, every Friday.
Every Friday.
Every Friday.
Okay. If you could be any supernatural creature, what would you be and why?
I don't know what the form would be, but one of the things that is so important to me is and I think some of this comes from experience, is watching people who have a dream and they don't have an opportunity to chase that dream. And I think that's why I choose the work that I do, because I always look at it from that perspective is, oh, this is somebody who has a dream and they want to create this. How do I help them facilitate that? So if there was a way that I could do that, where I could affect change in a positive way on a much greater level, that's what I would choose.
Like you'd be Samantha from Bewitched?
Kind of.
Like it's got to be a supernatural power, right? So you got to be something. Yeah. Or like the genie from I Dream of Jeannie.
Yes, I was obsessed with her when I was a kid.
Yeah. Plus she's got cool clothes.
Yes.
Right.
And a great place to live in that bottle. It was
right.
So
the bottle with all the
with
the me too. I love that bottle.
That circular couch. Yeah.
Okay. What is something that you can do better than anyone else you know?
Okay. I think one thing that I'm really good at is when people are talking to me, they're using their words. What I'm hearing are beliefs. And so what I'm trying to figure out is what they're not saying tells me what's really going on. And I think I'm pretty good, really good at being able to extract that.
That's actually true. Yeah. I know you do that. Mm-hmm. And you're like, that is actually your superpower. That's how you zero in on people, right? So quickly. I mean, anybody that gets to work with you is very, very lucky. Gina Gomez and Associates.com. I feel like when I used to go to these things with my mother and there was this man on the stage that would say house brunt coffee over and over again. I didn't understand that was part of the song. And my mother goes, no, he's advertising the coffee.
That's hilarious.
Gina Gomez and Associates.com. Oh my God.
That's amazing.
Anyway, listen, thank you so much for coming. To learn more about Gina, the work she does, and all of her amazing offerings, plus she also has the best, most awesome, very short and so well done newsletter that she sends out. Really, really good. Just head on over to Gina Gomez and Associates.com. And as always, for a summary, quotes, links, and a transcript of our fabulous conversation, just visit us on our show notes page by clicking the link in this episode's description, by heading on over to itwpodcast.com. Thank you so much for joining us today, Gina.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun. So we'll do this again tomorrow, correct?
Yes. Okay. See you at the same time. Okay, fine. Put in our books. All right. What a great conversation. So what did we learn today? I learned so much today, but I think the thing that most stood out for me was the frequency of core values. I think that really hit home, and how that actually plays into the manifestation process. That when we manifest our reality and when we know our core values, it really sends out clear signals to the universe about what we want to see come back. And it brings in the type of energy of clients and friends, and no matter where you focus on that. And then also, I also thought her Sunday, taking that one day to really give yourself that day and rest and do an inventory and all that. I thought that was really good too. So listen, she was just fantastic and was phenomenal. Thank you for listening. Until next time, I'm Colette Baron-Reid. Be well.